Shmovement is a term that originated in the Smash community. It's mainly just a fancy way of saying that someone had impressive movement. But I want to kind of build on this idea and take a closer look at how we view movement in games. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to create a separation between shmovement and just regular movement in games. Now, regular movement is just moving your character. It's the process of getting your character from point A to point B. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. But now let's define shmovement. And the definition we're gonna go with here is, and I made this up, is the degree to which a game allows you and incentivizes you to be more creative about moving your character. I made this definition to pretty much say that shmovement is a spectrum. It isn't an all or nothing concept. Some games have a lot of shmovement, some games have a little shmovement, that kind of thing. It depends on how specific the game allows you to be. With that said, I want to break down all the different ways that games handle shmovement and how that can differ from just regular movement. Let's start with environmental interaction. So the environment of a game, the level, is usually really important when it comes to traversal. Every decision you make about moving your character, it's in relation to the environment, obviously. If there's an obstacle in your way, you may have to walk around it or jump over it or jump on it or jump off it, whatever. And every game has different rules about how they want you to interact with the environment. And some of these rules are what can determine whether the game has shmovement or just regular old movement. Some games have surfaces that you can only interact with through prompts or context sensitive moments. Other games let you interact more freely with similar surfaces and aren't as strict about the context you can do it in. But y'all see how I could get up this as long as I was looking around. Even just little things like that with this game. Very cool, very loose, very gamey. Let's use a very easy example with Hi-Fi Rush. Now in Hi-Fi Rush you have a grappling hook. It can be used to navigate the environment. But the only time the grappling hook can be used outside of combat is when you're at specific locations in the game that allow you to activate the button prompt. This is not shmovement. That is just regular movement. That's just regular movement. The game isn't allowing or incentivizing creativity in these instances. You press the button, your character uses the grappling hook and goes to the next point. That is it. And the reason I like to use this example is because there are other examples of grappling hooks being used in games, and it can really showcase how just because a game has a thematically similar mechanic doesn't mean that the mechanic is functionally similar. Let's look at Splatoon 3 in this case, which also has a grappling hook mechanic with the Zipcaster special. Now the Zipcaster allows you to grapple on most surfaces. Matter of fact, the grappling hook in Splatoon 3 is so versatile that it can be used to grapple to areas outside the map that can't normally be reached, and you can use that to sneak up on people or get closer to the spawn point or whatever. In other words, the interaction isn't context sensitive, it's lenient, and it allows the player to make different choices with how they use the grappling hook. This is shmovement. That's shmovement. The utility of the mechanic is more versatile than how you would see the grappling hook used in Hi-Fi Rush, even though they're thematically similar. So, okay, let's stay on the topic of environment. Now, can a game be too lenient with giving the player interactive freedom? And the answer to this, yeah, it can. And remember, the definition we made for shmovement isn't just about allowing the player to get creative. It's also about giving them a reason to do so. Let's use Super Smash Bros. For example. One of the goals in the Super Smash Bros. Series, if you're familiar, is to not get knocked off of the stage. And to do this, your character can use aerial movement options and stuff like that to get back on stage. And that can look like using an extra jump, using aerial moves, or grabbing the ledge. But let's compare stage recovery in Melee with stage recovery in later Smash games. In Melee, first of all, you fall faster than you do in Smash Ultimate or even Brawl, and you have to be very close to the ledge to grab it compared to later Smash games. What this means is that you have more reasons to actually think and be careful about how you want to get back to the stage because you're falling faster. You have to be more precise while considering that your opponent can edge guard you as well. In Smash Ultimate, you fall slower and can be slightly further away from the ledge in order to grab it. This means that even though you have more time and flexibility to get back to the stage, there are fewer reasons to be more creative about how you do it. Whether I do a jump and an up B or an air dodge then a jump matters less than it does in Melee because I'm falling slower. There's no friction or there's less risk because I'm falling slower. Basically, the area off stage is more trivialized than it is in Melee. By the way, this isn't a good or a bad thing because there's valid reasons to do both. But I'm using this example to drive home the point that freedom alone isn't what defines Shmovement. The freedom has to be paired with friction with the environment. Basically, let's put it like this. Jumping over a line in the sand is different from jumping over a fence, even though you're jumping in both situations. Does that make sense? I think it does. Even though you're jumping in both situations, the line in the sand isn't incentivizing you to think harder about how you're jumping. Okay, either way, let's move on. Let's move on from the environment aspect and talk about actually controlling your character, which is probably what most people are thinking when they talk about Shmovement. And we can start with a concept called granularity. And I just learned this word recently, but it's really useful. Granularity is basically the degree to which something has been broken down to smaller pieces. In the context of Shmovement, it is basically how many smaller actions can be found in one action. This might sound confusing, so let me give an example. And I hate to keep picking on this game, but we're gonna talk about Hi-Fi Rush again with another simple example. In Hi-Fi Rush, when you jump after a run, your forward momentum is very limited and you have very little directional influence while you're in the air. Compare this to another action game like Bayonetta, where after you jump, you can still influence the direction that Bayonetta moves before she lands. This is granularity. After you do one action, in this case, a jump, you can do several smaller adjustments to that action afterwards. In this case, influencing the direction that Bayonetta falls. That is Shmovement. Granularity in this instance allows you to be more creative about what happens after you jump. The next aspect of controlling your character that I want to discuss is speed, because one thing that people seem to mistake with Shmovement is that it's about how fast your character moves, when that is not always the case. In fact, a game can be fast with no Shmovement, and the game can feel heavy and weighty but have a lot of Shmovement. Boost Era Sonic is definitely very fast, but the level design does not incentivize creativity. There's single solutions to navigate a lot of the levels and a lot of context sensitive moments within the levels where player control barely matters. On the flip side, Monster Hunter Rise characters run relatively slow and have more weight to their movement, but the wire bug and the ability to wall run on many of the surfaces, regardless of context, that lets you get creative with how you move around the environment. This is Shmovement. Now, the most fun, and I'd personally say the most important aspect that defines Shmovement, is execution. This is basically what the game requires you to input in order to move around. This part is important not because all Shmovement needs to have high executional depth, but remember, Shmovement is a spectrum, so executional depth usually determines the degree of Shmovement a game has. So, for example, Neon White is a game where the goal is to defeat every enemy in the level while reaching the end of the stage as fast as possible. There are usually several ways to reach the end of the level, and the fastest ways usually require higher execution. To explain this better, I'm going to show how I went through this level when I first started playing Neon White, and then I'm going to show how I got a faster time after some practice. Rewind the video if you got to during this part. So in Neon White, you have card weapons you can pick up. You can throw away the cards in order to get special movement abilities, like a double jump with the Elevate card or a bomb jump with the Purify card. You can also use the cards to fire guns until your ammo runs out. So right here, I'm going to use the elevate card to get over these gaps. And then I'm going to pick up the purify card to bomb jump off of that wooden floor. Then use another bomb to break that wooden wall down. Then I'm going to get rid of these enemies. Remember, you have to get rid of all the enemies before you get to the end. You see the number of enemies left at the top of the screen right there. So I'm killing the rest of these enemies with the purify gun. Getting rid of them. Then I'm going to bomb jump off of this enemy and then get to the end of the level. That's 49 seconds. It's pretty good. Okay, let me show you how I got a faster time after this. So I do an elevate double jump like before, but now I throw my bombs early to get a bomb jump and skip that section, anticipate getting another bomb, and then I throw it backwards to kill that enemy that I skipped instead of going through that whole path from the beginning. And then I fire my guns, another bomb jump early, and then I fire my weapon at the last enemy as I'm landing. 29 seconds. That is how execution works in relation with Shmovement. My execution and my input as a player made a big difference in how I navigated the level. Also, #1 on the leaderboard, just saying. Actually, this was around when the game first launched, but still. But that's my breakdown of the differences between Shmovement and Movement. What are your thoughts? Are there any examples of games that you feel have Shmovement or don't have Shmovement? Do you feel that these differences matter? Sound off. Let me know what you think. GK, peace out.